One of the most exciting innovations today may also be the least understood: crypto. So we spoke with one of the most trusted players in the crypto industry, Peter Smith, CEO of Blockchain, who believes people should have more economic choice in a world where that's increasingly harder to find. From Ballard Studios in Washington, D.C., it's 13th and Park.
The hard things that are necessary, we either do it or we'll pay the price down the road.
That often is missing in politics.
We have to solve everything.
It's a nightmare.
You and I can differ, but that doesn't mean you and I cannot be friends.
I have faith in the American people.
Those are the facts.
The Illuminati, right there. Aliens could have invaded and nothing would surprise me at this point.
We went from North Korea to M&M. That's a lot, man.
What's in this tea?
Well, Peter, welcome to the show. Trust is a very important value in crypto, and you are a leading platform in this space and one of the most trusted ones. But you've talked about the difference between missionaries and mercenaries, suggesting that mercenaries, are out there maybe shredding some of that trust. What do we need to do in crypto for people to have greater confidence in this industry moving forward?
Well, look, I think that the vast majority of people building in the crypto space are doing it for the right reasons. That said, just like in anything, the bad apples have a tendency of attracting a lot more attention than the good apples, right?
Right.
And so, unfortunately, consumers can sometimes have a hard time, or customers can sometimes have a hard time, delineating between, what is a really legitimate project or legitimate company and what is not. And so I think that, there's sort of two ways that can be solved. One is through better product and software, and that's something that, we've obviously spent a lot of time on. The second is through good regulation and market structure. And that's something that, is a really active conversation right now in DC. That's something that, I think that we'll get this year. And I fully expect the US to sort of lead the way globally in crypto market structure regulation by the end of the year. But, first and foremost, it comes to the United States and the entrepreneurs in the United States really setting a great example globally for the kind of products and services that we offer to customers. And, that's something that we're really passionate about doing here at blockchain.com and really proud of our track record here for taking care of customers and keeping them safe across the crypto market. I think the most challenging thing about that is frankly balancing that with the fact that it is a free market, right? And at the end of the day, if someone wants to launch Fartcoin, it's a free market and it's a free world and you're allowed to launch Fartcoin, right?
Right.
And if a customer wants to buy some Fartcoin, at the end of the day, we're not here to make financial decisions for them. We might provide a lot of warnings. We might tell the customer it's high risk. And certainly we're going to do all those things. But at the end of the day, it is a free market. And I think that's really important because so much of our economy and our financial system now is not a free market.
Yeah.
It's largely controlled, planned, rigged. And I think we're finding out more and more about that every day, just how rigged and controlled and manipulated a lot of things outside of crypto are. And so, I think it is really important that consumers have that choice, but also important that we give them the education to make wise choices. So it's a really tricky balance, but it's something that we kind of have to work towards and push on, on a daily basis.
Well, you talk a lot about how crypto is kind of the leveler, right? It gives people economic choice and freedom they didn't have before. That is kind of the attractive thing where you're cutting out the middlemen and allowing people to maybe have more control over their own future. Is that kind of the crux of the argument for crypto and the prospects for its future?
Yeah, it is. When you think about it, one of the most interesting things we've done from a legacy perspective here is that we've put a US dollar checking account in tens of millions of people's pockets all over the world that would have never had access to a US dollar checking account. We take that for granted, living here in America. But if you live in Nigeria, having a US dollar checking account in your pocket is amazingly powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that right now, I could pull out my phone and without any sort of financial intermediary in the way, I could send you $1, $1 million, $1 billion. That's kind of wild. And the fact that it's like a bare asset and it instantly clears in a trustless way, that's an incredible accomplishment from a technology standpoint, from a market liquidity standpoint. It's really probably without a doubt, the most interesting thing to have happen in finance in the last decade.
But Peter, you've also spoken about the impact regulations could have on not allowing for this kind of economic freedom and choice.
Economic freedom and choice is really important in the world because it's the basis of human freedom. And I think this is something that, we've lost a lot in the last 30 years, 40 years. And obviously I'm a young guy, so I don't even go back 40 years. But when you think about like even 20 years ago, Amazon going public, unaudited,
Right.
pre-revenue, I think they had 70 employees when they went public. You would never see that today. The average time to IPO went from 4 to 5 years. Amazon was pretty quick at 3 because of the tech boom, to 14 years or never. And why is that? Well, a huge amount of it is the regulation, the regulatory burden required to go public. And going public is something that now that the company is about 11 years old, that I have to start thinking about a lot. I got the IPO budget from our CFO the other day. It's twice as big as the entire operating budget of Amazon.com when it went public.
Wow.
And it's on the low end. What does that mean we did? That means that the average upper middle class person in America does not get to invest in the next Amazon anymore. We have no individual middle class shareholders other than employees. That means that you don't have companies going public at a couple $100 million anymore. You have companies going public at 20, 30, 15 billion minimum. Right? So we have this very heavy regulatory framework now in financial services in the United States. And we have a very prohibitive set of surveillance, which is incredibly expensive to comply with. And so people wonder, why is economic growth in America relatively low? A huge reason, I think, is that we no longer have really free financial markets, and we've become, to some extent, a planned economy. Now, why does crypto matter in that whole equation? Frankly, it is really hard to ever roll back the clock on rules.
True.
Like deregulating things is very, very difficult, as they're finding out in DC right now. And they have the dream team of deregulation in DC right now, and it's struggle. It's hard. Crypto gives you a chance, and crypto financial markets gives you a chance to redo all that from the ground up. And if we get things right, and I believe the administration wants to, we can build rules that allow us to do it in a safe way that really empowers the middle class to create wealth and for entrepreneurs to build. And we can use that to restart economic growth in the United States.
On the one hand, regulation suggests you're going to protect people, right? In this case, protect consumers. But what they're really doing, not just about crypto, but all across the map, is denying people opportunity. And this is what I think the financial industry has really had a gripe about for many, many years. So much regulation under the heading of we're taking care of the American people, when in fact, what they're doing is they're denying the American people choice and freedom.
Correct. And I think that a lot of what we're also doing is forcing them offshore, which is another interesting conversation. By not having regulatory clarity in the United States, by having very confusing rules, one of the things that we've net achieved is pushing US consumers to use offshore competitors that are, for the most part, run by Chinese teams. Like the net result of the Biden administration crypto crackdown and choke point 2.0 and the Gary Gensler crusade was that you basically passed dominance of US crypto to offshore players that originated in China.
Do you think people understand that dynamic within the industry?
Within the industry, absolutely. And it was a point that was made to the prior administration repeatedly, but I don't think that it was something that they cared about. And I think that the current administration understands this. This is why it's so important to bring crypto back to America and to make sure that America is the crypto superpower and crypto capital of the world, because you can't put this stuff back in a box. I think that was a mistake that the prior administration really made, is they had this mistaken belief that they could be more powerful than technology. That's not how the world works. It's kind of like, if somebody woke up one day and decided that they didn't like the idea of cars, people just move to a country where they allow cars.
True.
And so people go other places, right? And what happened, the net impact was people went to other providers that were offshore, that did not have a US nexus, which I think was probably damaging to US interests and is something that we really do need to shift back. We do not want, sort of the next generation of finance and the internet capital markets to be controlled by China. We want them to be controlled by the West, by the United States.
So you've said that AI is transforming the world, right? But you have government who has never been quick on the switch in terms of anything, much less innovation. What should government's role be here in terms of allowing innovation to flourish, but still being able to establish, again, you might say, clear sets of rules?
It's really tricky because you want there to be as few rules as possible to let that innovation advance as quickly as possible. On the other hand, you have a technology that is potentially dangerous to humans.
Yeah.
I'm not in the camp of us being under immediate near-term threat of AI superintelligence wiping out the human race. I am in the camp of intelligence basically becoming worth almost zero. That has enormous societal impacts, particularly for whatever country gets it right first. And I think that the best way that we can get it right is to let the free market figure out how to get that right. I think that to the extent that you have the government come in and try to say, okay, this is how the world's going to work, but intelligence is basically limitless, I think that they're going to get it wrong because it's just what governments do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the safety question is really, really important question. And I do think that there does need to be a safety layer, just like we have a safety layer with pharmaceutical drugs. Now, the problem with all this is that I can't really think of a good example of a safety layer that we have currently that is done well.
Yeah.
So even cars, which is the most basic, right? We haven't changed the speed limit in America since the 1960s. We have radically better cars today. We have driverless cars now. We don't have driverless lanes. Why can't a Tesla be going 110 miles an hour on the interstate? There's really no reason. It's kind of an example of my point before, where it's like once you do some regulation, it's hard to ever roll it back, right? And so on one hand, I do think that there needs to be safety regulation for AI. On the other hand, it's a little bit of a tricky topic because I can't really find any example of the government doing any kind of safety regulation well. So,
to date.
I'm a bit mixed about how to square that circle. But I think that the more important thing that the government needs to do is we need to focus on the production of silicon. So right now, all silicon in the whole world comes from one tiny island that's useful anyway. The US and China both, we have no ability to build our own silicon. Kind of like, we're moving from the sort of commodity or energy age into the age of compute.
Yeah.
And compute is a national strategic resource. And we need to invest in it like it is. We need to foster it, encourage it, almost whatever it takes to be able to have our own strategic ability to produce silicon is incredibly important, because our kids will not talk about oil supplies. Our kids will talk about silicon supplies.
How did you get into crypto? What led you down this path? Is there a short story to where Peter was to where Peter is?
Boredom.
Boredom.
No, I was taking some time off. I was going through old emails, came across a friend who had forwarded me an email about Bitcoin, kind of got involved, started hacking around and building, and met my co-founders. And the original vision is still the same, the one that we have today, which is like building software that is useful for people in the crypto space. We want to enable access to the crypto markets. Obviously, that's expanded from originally just a search engine site, a data analytics site, all the way to where we are today, which is institutions, consumers, trading. But that sort of ethos of like, okay, what do customers need? Let's build that, is still very much the ethos that we have today.
So I've got a nerdy question. What is your theory on whom Satoshi Nakamoto is? And for those who don't understand that question, the alleged founder, creator of Bitcoin. What is your take on that long conversation people have going back and forth about who's behind that?
Very early on, I decided that I would never publicly speculate about who Satoshi is, because if I get it right, I would feel really bad. And if I get it wrong, it's also bad. But what I will say is, I think Satoshi was a group of people that brought an incredible innovation to the world. And I think it's something that we should all be grateful for. And I certainly am grateful for. And the other interesting thing about it is that they, weren't really involved after the first year.
Right.
And so at this point, very little remains other than the original ideas. And it's super important that the rest of us sort of carry that torch forward.
Where do you see crypto in 5 years, 10 years? I mean, I know it's an industry that's moved in all sorts of directions and very quickly over the last decade. Where do you see it in 5 or 10 years?
In 5 or 10 years, it's going to be a daily part of your life. And it'll be a daily part of life for, people all over the world. And that's what I hope it'll be. And that's what I know it'll be.
Well, Peter, we really appreciate your time, and we appreciate what you do, because what your company does is it establishes and tries to drive confidence and trust for investors in crypto. I mean, I can't imagine anything more important than that. We talked about that earlier, and what you do and what your company does all the time, I think kind of speaks for itself.
Well, I really appreciate the kind words and the great conversation this morning.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.